This is how I co-wrote, directed, did the visual effects for, and overall made my first short. It's called Ouroboros. It's a sci-fi short, 17 minutes long, about two astronauts going to investigate a strange, mysterious object flying through our solar system. I wanted to make a short that excited me, and unfortunately the things that excite me tend to be expensive to make. You see, when you want to make Star Wars or Dune, and this is your set, you've got a problem, but not an entirely unsolvable one. Let's start at the beginning. 2023, I was living in London with my brother, and we wanted to make a film. I was, and still am, into sci-fi films like Arrival and 2001: Space Odyssey. But the common theme here is seeing humans react to something entirely foreign and unknown. Me and my brother wrote a short script and got it to a point where we were happy enough that we were going to start figuring out how we were actually going to make it. The script involved these two astronauts starting the film in an airlock, leaving, going over to Ouroboros, and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff happening over there. And like I said before, this was our set. The first thing I decided to do was to make a very basic animatic of the whole film, with these characters that look like they're from Roblox. It helped me get a better sense of the flow of the film and whether or not some of the dialogue was working. This is technically a very crude first version of the film. Now, the main way I was going to make this film feasible was to do with the camera. I decided for the majority of the film, the camera would be fixed to our protagonist, William, aka Gully, my brother, meaning it will leave a lot of it up to the audience to figure out what's going on around him, whether it's through audio, or what you see behind him, or in the reflections of his visor, or his acting/reactions to his surroundings. So then we knew all we had to film was my brother, and that's something that we can set up. One more thing I decided that we really needed to sell my brother being in a spacesuit was a helmet. It's always very obvious when an actor is just superimposed into a suit or helmet or anything like that, as you can see. So I really wanted something real that Gully could fit into, and it would really help with his performance as well. So that's when I reached out to a couple of prop companies in London. I sent a bunch of emails, most didn't respond except one. DesignWorks Windsor. They responded to my surprise from nothing but a small pitch email, and we organised a meeting. So I hopped on the Elizabeth line and headed out to Windsor, which was beautiful, by the way. If you're around London, you should definitely go. But I met them at their studio and essentially pitched my idea. They were really into it and excited to work on it. That was until I told them my budget. Fair enough, for an established company working on the most recent Alien series, a few thousand ain't much. But thankfully, in my case, they agreed on a few conditions. Number one, I get no revisions. I'd have to entirely trust them and not be able to check in on the process halfway through. And number two, they get to share it wherever they want on their pages, on their social media, which to me sounded like a benefit because it was like free advertising in a way. So overall, it was a great deal and I absolutely took it. I returned back to my moldy flat excited as to what they were going to make. In the meantime, me and Gully started blocking out the entire shoot. You see, we would film Gully stationary with the camera straight on him. But his character would be moving around the scene and reacting to different things around him, even rotating and flipping. So he had to memorize all the movements, all the rotations, all the eye lines for the entire 15-minute long take, all while staring into a living room. This is what we're doing in this video here. In our backyard, going back and forth through the motions. So that when he's filming in a dark, barren living room, he understands his movements, his rotations, his eye lines, everything. A couple weeks went by and we'd gotten the movements down pretty good when I heard back from Windsor. They said they were ready to show me their work. Alright, so this is me taking a video of the helmet. Here it is. And holy shit did they pull through. What the hell? I could not have asked for a better helmet. It was unbelievable. It had a detachable visor, it had working lights. It was based off the newer NASA Artemis helmets. They nailed that near future look that I was going for. I was incredibly grateful, and it really inspired me to do my absolute best on this film. And we were ready to start shooting real takes now.
In the spirit of documenting the filmic process, we're currently rigging up the camera to the suit with cable ties.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So it began. We did our first real takes. I would then take those takes and put them into DaVinci Resolve and overlay them with the animatic to check how our timing was going. And after a few takes and a few notes here and there, we got everything down to a T. Well, I say we. It was mainly Gully. For all the non-actors out there, take a moment to think about how impressive it is and difficult it is to act pretty much alone for 17 minutes straight with no visual reference in a messy living room, but you're supposed to be in space. Because that's what my brother did. Honestly, I'm trying to make this video structured, but this shoot went back and forth through so many different processes that it's hard to do. But we had the footage now. We would do more takes later on just to really nail it, but this meant that I could start going into the post process. Before I could start animating anything, I had to make all the models. Oh, okay. This is the part you don't see, because I edited out. So, for the modeling department, first up we had the astronauts. Bam, we can use the same model twice. Went through a couple iterations with the first one being more inflated and a bit basic, to be honest, but then my second go round I made something more like this, which I thought was better. I also had to make the EVA backpacks, and I started off with this huge one, which I kind of liked, but it didn't really fit the tone of the film. Maybe I'll use it for another project someday. But for this super serious short film, I had to make something a little more proportional. And bam, we had our astronaut. Hope I'm pointing in the right direction. Next up was the ship. I called it SS Quebec. I started with this cool boat concept because it was like a good mix of old and new, if that makes any sense, with the heat re-entry shield acting like the boat part. And to be honest, I actually liked it a lot, but again, it didn't really fit the near futuristic vibe I was going for. I realized I needed something that more closely resembled the ISS rather than something out of Star Trek, I don't know. Which led me to create this thing, which was, yeah, I think that was pretty much what I was going for. A little centrifuge gravity spin thing, and it definitely matched the film vibe more. And it worked really well in the harsh, direct space light with all these interweaving, overlapping parts. I also had to model the airlock interior, which, yep, here it is. I don't really know what to say about that. I made some bags, some nets, put some flags up there for like the world building, I guess. And I also had to create this little sciencey, gadgety box called Dorothy. Basically, it would hold all of the equipment that the astronauts needed to research Ouroboros. And it's called Dorothy because they're gonna go into a storm or something, shit's getting real. But yeah, it had these compartments that come up, these little computers, had landing legs for landing on Ouroboros, it had these little probes that shot out. I was pretty happy with it. And lastly, I needed Ouroboros, which was the easiest by far. It was literally just a donut with a ball in the center, scaled to 1 billion. Now, you may be thinking, Zen, what the hell, these models look nowhere near ready. Just look at those awful textures and really unoptimized topology. And my response to that is, I'm just gonna cover it up because that's my workaround as a low budget, small filmmaker. You see, we're so focused on Gully and his helmet, and the depth of field is so shallow that everything we see in the background is obscured and dark, and we only really see what's in the reflection of his visor and what's blurred out behind him. So you'll never get to see these monstrosities of UV unwraps up close. Speaking of Gully, how do we turn this footage into the astronaut in the scene? Well, initially I literally just put the footage inside the helmet, which was okay, but it didn't really work well with lighting or any kind of perspective shift, and it just looked fake and flat. And by the way, this version of the film you're seeing was technically like the first crack I had at animating the whole thing. And yeah, no, I was questioning my 3D animation skills when this thing came out of the render because yeah, that was a lot of work, and that's sort of what came out. So, yeah, but hey, it was a start, you know? So I needed a better solution rather than just plastering the footage inside the helmet. First up, on the newer takes, I made sure that Gully was as evenly lit as possible. Before this, I was literally trying to match the lighting in the scene in the real world. I saw them use this technique in the film Gravity, but they had 360 LED screens to match the lighting. I had this. One little thing. So I essentially evenly lit him to the best of my ability in the space that I had. I then took a still frame of the footage, cut out the helmet, and pasted that onto the helmet model. I then used the footage again to create a 3D model of Gully's head using this head tracking add-on, and I painstakingly tracked 15 minutes of footage, constantly readjusting the position of the CG model head to match the footage, and then just going back and forth over and over and over and over and over for decades. There was no way around this, believe me, I tried. I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. I was staring at my brother's face for about 3 days straight until I had this. It's not bad, it's pretty neat. It kind of looks like him. The CG head moved, and it was really coming to life. You could see kind of the performance in it, even though it's just a blank face. But now for the cool part. Because the model's movement matched the movement in the take we did, because, you know, I just spent hours tracking it, I was able to project the footage onto the model. And because they're moving at the same rate, location, rotation, and all that, it just worked. And this was so handy because it meant that it would react to any lighting in the scene, any perspective shift. I would have full free reign to like change the camera angle slightly or move around and change the lighting in post, and it would all just work seamlessly. And I was really excited when I got this to work because it just meant absolute freedom. If you couldn't tell, I was pretty happy with it, and yeah, pretty proud of figuring it out eventually. The only downside about this method was it was take specific, meaning if I wanted to redo the shot, redo a take, there was something about Gully's performance I wanted to change, I would have to retrack the head, which is why we made absolutely sure that we were happy with the performance before I went and did all that work. And then it was time for another huge undertaking. It was animating the whole thing, both the astronauts, Dorothy, the ship, Ouroboros, the movement, just everything. There's not much I can tell you about this really. It was just animating the poses, and then going into finer detail later, animating the hands and moving, you know, compartments and buttons and levers and that kind of stuff. Like it was just, yeah, just work. I just saw my cat do a butt slide. I've never seen her do that before. That's fucking crazy. What? Yeah, it didn't need to be perfect because we wouldn't actually see most of it, but I didn't want it to be bad either. The main things I had to focus on was William's movement and his hands and just his overall matching his head and torso movement to what was actually happening in the scene, because if you turn your head, you slightly turn that way, and so, yeah, you get it. One funny thing I discovered while animating the earlier version of the film was that in Blender, the further you get away from the world origin, the funnier animation gets. And funny as in like, it just doesn't really work. You see, in this film, we're traveling huge distances. I really wanted to capture the scale, so the scene was absolutely massive in terms of size. And the astronauts travel really far out originally from the world origin. And I just noticed that this weird stuff was happening where the camera was jittery and all the positions of the bones were all a bit jittery. And it's because things get less accurate the further out you go, which you can only discover by accident, really. I mean, like, yeah, you can see the jittering here. It's really distracting. And I went crazy for a while not knowing what it was until I found this one Reddit post that was like, yeah, things get weird the further out you go. Like, you would only discover that in very rare circumstances in Blender. And the only reason I did was because it was one long take and I wanted to keep it continuous, whereas if I'd done it in separate shots, I would have always stayed closer to the center. But luckily there was a really easy solution. You just parent everything to an empty, and when the astronauts move one way, you move it in the opposite direction, keeping what's being filmed in the center of the world origin. So now I basically had my entire short film. All I had to do was render it.
Ooh, what frame are we up to?
18,684.
How many hours?
This render has been going for like 12 days, I think, 13 days. And we've got 1.4 days left, so about 30-ish hours left.
Nearly there.
Nearly there. This is not the last version, but it's close to. The render literally took 2 weeks because I was rendering on my laptop. I really had to find a hobby other than gaming because my laptop was unusable that whole time. I know, tragic. Also, Rogue's part of the video now because she can't be quiet. But eventually, out came the 22,000 frames. And again, yeah, at that point, I technically had my full short film done. And I was pretty happy with it. I mean, it needed some music, some, editing, credits, that kind of stuff. But 97% of the work was all done. All up, I think it took me about 6 months in total from conception to finished product. But again, that process is a bit murky because when do you actually start and when do you actually stop? I did also end up adding some extra shots just for reference, just because after feedback I realized it was a bit too obscure to know what was going on, which I know goes against the original idea of the entire film just being on William. But you gotta kill your darlings sometimes, and for the sake of the film, it was better. I also did some small things here, like for example, halfway through the film, I actually turned the camera around to face forward, and small things like that just to set the scene a little bit. And yeah, these extra shots really did help the film, and they ended up being some of my favorite in the entire film, which made me question my process from the start, to be honest, but hey, that's okay. For example, the first shot in the film now was this title sequence with a bit of exposition, where Neptune is slowly revealed while Ouroboros' shadow passes over the front of it. That ended up being my favorite shot in the film, and that was nowhere in the initial storyboards. And it worked incredibly well with the music I ended up going with. I think it just goes to show not to be too attached to your original ideas and be able to improvise a little bit. Also, for anyone interested, I will be adding all these files up onto Patreon completely for free. So if you wanted to play around with them, you can go have a look there. I won't delve into the music or editing today because this video is already probably too long, but Ouroboros did end up going to an international film festival and was shortlisted at a couple others as well, which was such a cool experience. And if you do want to know more about that end of things, let me know down in the comments. The full film is available here on my channel, but if you wanted to watch a higher quality version, it's also on Vimeo. I'll link both below or on the screen or whatever works. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, especially if you made it this far into the video. I have a couple new projects I'm working on, so if you want to stay updated, feel free to subscribe, or don't, up to you. Don't, maybe do, I don't know. You're all the best, and I'll catch you next time. Outro.